right, Laura. So here we are, final Lori Vallow Daybell trial. When you think back to 2 years ago, right now, you guys had just reached a verdict as a jury in Lori's first case. What are your thoughts over the past 2 years? You came out to some of the trial last time, and here we are again now.
Yeah. Um, I was kind of just thinking about it as far as how I felt the summer after the trial. And I think it was a lot more traumatic the further I get from it, realizing how traumatic it actually was. Um, I I think I functioned through the summer and I think I was better. I when we talked before, I had gone through therapy and, you know, had done that, but it still took a lot of time to kind of fully get my energy back, even. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but just I think my mind was still constantly processing it and trying to really understand what I had just been through. Um, and then even going to the trial a year ago for Chad's trial, again, I went through after it was all over another sort of grieving process because everybody was here and we were talking and being able to process. And then, like that, everybody was gone. So it was another sort of processing and then going to Arizona. Um, when was that? April?
Yeah.
Yeah. I It was only 2 days and I'm so glad I went, but it was so exhausting. I I I I can't come back. I can't do it again.
Why is that? Why do you think it was so exhausting? You mean seeing her, kind of reliving everything? Why is it?
I think so. I mean, I almost went back to therapy. I've actually contacted my counselor and I kind of was able to get through it on my own. But I think listening to her so defiant and spewing what I knew to be lies is really hard to sit and listen to and not be able to say anything and not, to just scream at her and be, so indignant. Like, you murdered your children and we already convicted you of that. And to act like, to say my daughter, Tylee, and she didn't talk much about JJ, but then saying my husband, and it was a lot to take in.
Yeah. Why did you want to come back?
To see all the family,
Mm.
I really have formed a bond with them, and I I am really glad I came when I did. I was there for Kay's testimony, which I was really grateful to be there and feel like I'm supporting her and to see. And we got to hang out for one evening while I was there. And so it was good to just sort of reconnect with them. But the trial part, I probably could have done without.
Right. Yeah. Not going to court.
Yeah.
Are you in touch still with some of the jurors you served with 2 years ago?
Yeah, in fact, I stayed with Tom and Susan Evans while I was there. They had an Airbnb, so I just stayed with them. And there's others too that I've stayed in contact with.
Are they following the latest stuff? Do you know? I know Tom is,
Yes,
of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, to a certain extent, not probably even not as in depthly as I have been, but yes, they have.
Yeah. When you're sitting in the courtroom this last trial and looking at the jurors, you were in their seats just years ago, and you know so much more now than they did.
Mhm.
What was going through your mind because for those that might not be familiar, they couldn't bring up any of the Idaho convictions. They couldn't bring up the fact that JJ was dead, that Tylee was dead, that Tammy Daybell, they don't even know who Tammy Daybell is. All this stuff that we know as the public, that you know as a juror. Uh, that was different in your case because you were kind of learning it. Well, I mean, the public knew that the children were dead and whatnot, but you were kind of learning as it went. What were your thoughts thinking about what those jurors were experiencing?
So during our trial, I kept thinking, there's always stuff in a trial that's not allowed to be admitted. And if it was right away, you would go, they're guilty, knowing the entire story. And I kept thinking, because I wasn't convinced for a long time because I didn't know anything. And I feel like probably even 3 weeks still just trying to put everything together and making sure I understood the facts. And then you start to have a gut feeling, but is there what they need to prove to make her guilty? I wasn't sure. And so I just I felt bad for them because we didn't have that. We got to know everything. We got to know what happened in Arizona, even though it wasn't supposed to be used as evidence against her. They I felt really bad for them. And I felt really bad for how they were just let out afterwards. And we were so protected. And I am so grateful to the court system for protecting us because it is traumatic. And I have briefly spoken to one of the jurors from that trial, and I just feel really bad for them. I mean, Arizona doesn't do, you know, I think they did better at protecting the victims and they didn't do as good protecting the jurors. And I feel really bad for them having to process all of this afterwards.
I wanted to ask you about that, the fact that the jurors in Idaho, the only time that we saw you as the media, as the public, is in the courtroom. Like
Yeah,
never again. And I remember chatting with you during a break one time when the jurors were walking like right by us.
I know.
What were the differences that you observed, and why do you say you kind of feel bad for them?
Well, I think they were ambushed, and I don't blame the media because I did want to know, like, what they just found out. But I think the reason that I even agreed to do the first interview that we had is to explain to people how hard it is to actually be on that side and to be nice to the jurors. And you don't always know what is going on. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know, what they have been through. And so to have all that media coming after them, and I think there's good actors and there's bad actors, right? And I'm glad that there are some of the good actors that actually got to interview them, um, and to get their story. I just wish they had a little time like we did to process it before being like,
Pounced. Yeah.
yeah,
But and just to let our audience know, what happened is we were told all the media was outside the courtroom. We were told someone from the courts came out and said none of the jurors want to talk to the media, like they want to go home. But then immediately after that person told us that, all of the jurors walked out to where we were all standing. Well,
right.
our job is we're going to say, okay, he told us this, but do you really want to talk? Rather
Yeah.
than walking them out a side door or a back door. And even the
Yes.
person that told us that was like, why did they bring him out this door without a guard, without an escort
Yep.
or anything? And
Yep.
then many of those jurors had to wait for the bus to go back to the
Right.
cars. So they're standing on a corner within feet of where the media are at. And it just kind of was you know, unusual situation. A few of them did
Yep.
talk there, and several others
Yep.
that I approached just kept walking. They did not want to talk. So,
Yeah.
but also you all had like meals brought in.
Yes.
You were in a secluded room from the public. I mean, it was very different than how the process is run here.
Yeah. In fact, when Tom and Susan and I were eating lunch downstairs in the cafeteria there was a juror sitting just, I mean, less than 10 feet away from us. And so we had to like kind of zip it because I didn't want anything to happen. I mean, we all know how serious it is that if you never want to have a mistrial and you don't, one of our jurors who talked afterwards ended up at the sort of the same thing where they wanted the case dismissed because of even if it was something innocent, they're going to take anything that you say and twist it and try to get, you know, a mistrial.
Yeah.
So,
So what would your advice be to, I know the potential jurors are not watching this as far as the potential jurors in Brandon's case, but
right.
if you were able to give them some advice today, what would you say? Before the trial starts, as we get going next week, hopefully.
Um, I, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a process, but it's important. It's our civil duty, which I, I didn't really grasp that before actually going through this process. Everybody's like, oh, I have jury duty, it's like, and then like yesterday when those potential jurors were asked to come back on Monday, I would have been so frustrated. But then the system can't work unless we all participate in it. And so I would say that it's worth it in the end, that what you do is it's noble, it's important, and she needs to be brought to justice for everybody. I know you get a lot of questions about why continue to go through the trials in Arizona, but Charles deserves the same respect as Brandon deserves in getting their justice.
And Brandon, has been there and he'll continue to be there through the trial. Very good, Laura. Anything that you want to add? Are you going to follow this one?
Probably not closely. I'm trying to, because it sucks you right back in though. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to watch. And I've been so busy that I really just kept on whatever updates you've given. Um, but wow, she puts on a show. I mean, it is just, it's something every single day that she does. And so yeah, I probably not as closely um as I have been.
Yeah.
Keep my sanity.
Right. Well, you can follow along the highlights, the key points. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for chatting with me. Anything you want to add?
Uh Mad props to your wife. I know what it's like to have your husband gone a lot, and it's a lot to keep the fort down.
Yes, you have a husband who travels and you know that well. So,
Yep.
yes, definitely props to her. Fortunately, hopefully this trial won't be too long.
As long and the kids are not in school, so that
Yeah, right.
lessens the load a little bit. But